Hey guys, tonight we're walking through smoke. The kind that stings your eyes and smells faintly of salt, ash, and old pride. You can taste the end of a civilization on your tongue. The air is thick with it, the last sigh of Troy. You probably won't survive this, not because of spears or arrows, but because this is the kind of aftermath that gnaws at your soul, one slow heartbeat at a time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far the night stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on a shoreline littered with debris, charred beams, splintered shields, the occasional sandal half buried in blackened sand. Behind you, the once mighty towers of Troy are nothing but fractured bones of stone. The war is over, 10 long years of siege, deception, and divine meddling. You'd think there'd be relief. There isn't. Only the eerie quiet that follows when too many men have shouted themselves hoarse. Agamemnon, the great king of Mycenae, surveys the wreckage with the blank stare of someone who's forgotten what winning feels like. Beside him, Menelaus is still clutching his wife's wrist, half in love, half in disbelief that all this carnage really began over her. Odysseus, meanwhile, stands apart, eyes on the sea, already scheming his way home. You can almost see his mind spinning, calculating routes, sacrifices, and lies to tell when the gods ask for tribute, but the gods aren't done. Oh no, they're leaning back on their celestial thrones, smirking. Athena feels insulted. Poseidon still holds grudges. And Aphrodite? She's watching the reunited lovers with an expression somewhere between smug satisfaction and boredom. Historians still argue whether this divine soap opera was meant to teach mortals humility, or just keep Olympus entertained. You wander through what's left of Priam's palace. The marble floors are cracked, streaked with soot, the air still hot from the fires. Somewhere, a harp string snaps in the silence. The surviving women, Hecuba, Andromache, Cassandra, are being rounded up, parceled out as prizes. And there's that awful, matter-of-fact cruelty that the ancients were so good at, the victors treating human beings like plunder. Odysseus negotiates calmly, ensuring he gets Cassandra's prophetic insight on his ship. Little does he know how badly that will end. Agamemnon claims Cassandra too, ignoring every warning that no mortal should take a prophetess unwillingly. He'll regret that, though not for long. Aeneas, that distant cousin of Priam, is already gone. The legends say he escaped in the confusion, carrying his lame father on his back, leading a small band toward the mountains. Most Greek soldiers laugh at the idea, some random Trojan prince rebuilding a city somewhere else. Sure, they say, and maybe pigs will sail. Centuries later, Roman poets will laugh last. For now, the victors divide the spoils. Gold for some, slaves for others. There's a strange justice in the randomness. Heroes who fought bravely die penniless, cowards stumble into fortune. Nestor, old and wise, quietly claims his share and starts preparing his ship before anyone can curse him with a favor. You'd think age has made him cautious. Really, he's just smart enough to know the gods are watching, waiting for hubris, and hubris, like smoke, lingers. You watch as the first sails unfurl. There's excitement in the air, but it's the brittle kind, too thin, too forced. Everyone just wants to go home. The sound of ropes creaking, anchors lifting, the ocean lapping at charred hulls, it's hypnotic. You almost believe the war's curse will end once they're at sea. Almost. A quirky tidbit here, some versions say the Greeks actually left a few men behind to rebuild Troy in a token gesture of mercy. Others claim they salted the earth so nothing could grow again. Archaeologists still debate whether that's symbolic or literal, pointing to burn layers and carbonized grains found in ancient soil. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, as it always does. You walk among the survivors as they board. Odysseus gives one last glance at the ruins. Agamemnon's ships are heavy with gold and gilt. Menelaus' fleet waits for a favorable wind. And behind them all, the smoke rises higher, curling toward Olympus like an offering no god has asked for. You can almost feel the curse lifting from the battlefield. But it doesn't. It just shifts direction, follows the ships like a shadow across the sea. The wind carries whispers, names of the dead, promises unkept, oaths broken beneath Troy's walls. When the last ship disappears over the horizon, Troy is silent. Only Aeneas' footprints remain, leading toward a future that no one here will ever see. You stay for a while longer, tracing your hand along the scorched stones, feeling the heat fade. The war was supposed to end glory, instead, it ended people. It turned heroes into haunted men and gods into gossips. You can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, the real story begins only now. In the long, painful journey back, the gulls circle lazily overhead, as if bored by human tragedy. The waves hiss at your feet, tugging at the ash, erasing footprints, rewriting endings. Somewhere, thunder mutters, and you realize Poseidon isn't done muttering either. The ships vanish into the horizon, small triangles of defiance against the gray sea. And you, like them, turn your face toward home, knowing home will never be the same again. You stand on the deck of Odysseus's ship, wind cool against your face, salt and tar thick in the air. Troy fades on the horizon, but the mood isn't victory, it's tension. Every creak of wood sounds like a god clearing their throat. Odysseus thrives in this uncertainty, turning disaster into strategy. You watch him squint at the sun, lips moving silently as he calculates stars, currents, and divine moods, already 3 steps ahead of Poseidon, his absent wife, and the bloodshed he must spin into an epic. Then the sea darkens. A hiss of wind, uneasy ripples, horizon swelling with thunderclouds. Sailors scramble, one whispers Athena's curse, another Poseidon's wrath. Waves slam the hull, lightning splits the sky. Odysseus shouts, calm yet fierce, chaos becomes an orchestra. The storm scatters the fleet. By morning, Odysseus's vessel drifts alone, sky eerily clear. Near a strange, lush island, men cheer while unease pricks your skin. Scouts confirm his caution, nothing this inviting is ever harmless. The Kikones. Drinking, pillaging, until pride costs them. Dawn strikes, Greeks are ambushed half-drunk, 6 men die per ship before retreat. Ancient sailors' tiny household god figurines are lost, leaving the crew spiritually naked. Weeks blur. Another island rises, gentle, laughing, the lotus eaters. Men taste the pale flowers, forget, collapse in dreamy smiles. Odysseus forces them back aboard, tying them to benches. Paradise fades, its song lingering like a whispered death. Days later, cliffs and caves, Cyclopes territory. Odysseus insists on exploring. Inside, cheese, milk, sheep, until Polyphemus returns, one massive eye gleaming. 2 men are eaten raw. Odysseus offers wine, the giant collapses drunk. A sharpened stake blinds him. You flee, clinging to sheep, but Poseidon's wrath is awakened. Back at sea, Odysseus looks older, men nurse bruises, mortal and divine. Islands ahead promise more temptation, punishment, lessons repeated. Sun dips, gulls glide. Beside the captain, you hear his quiet word, home. But the wind shifts. Somewhere beneath, Poseidon smiles. You stand on another deck, beneath Agamemnon's banner, king of kings, conqueror of Troy, embodiment of hubris. The sea glitters around his fleet, victory clings to the sails, mingled faintly with unburied guilt. Agamemnon's ship cuts through the waves with regal confidence. Bronze armor gleams, he stands at the prow, head lifted like a statue. A gust shakes the rigging. Sailors mutter prayers, he waves them off. The storm has spent its wrath, he says, but the storm has barely started. Clouds gather, thunder murmurs, rain falls like a wall. Men scramble, lightning flashes on armor and water. Chaos is terrifyingly beautiful. Historians debate the legendary storm of Agamemnon. Rebellion, disease, or God's wrath, but every version begins his cursed journey home. When the sea calms, only a few ships remain. Menelaus's fleet vanishes, Agamemnon sails alone, brooding. You see cracks in him, whispers to himself, thoughts of Iphigenia, the daughter he sacrificed, or Clytemnestra waiting, grief sharpened into a human storm, land appears, mountains, olive groves, Mycenae. People cheer, forgetting hunger and loss. Clytemnestra greets him, soft and dangerous, praising triumph with unreadable eyes. Behind her, Aegisthus waits. Agamemnon either ignores him or assumes victory erases all. Inside the palace, torches line the halls. Feast of lamb, figs, wine thick as blood. Laughter rehearsed, too bright. Agamemnon relaxes, telling stories of Troy and divine favor. Later, lamps low, Clytemnestra invites him to bathe. Steam blurs the room, water glimmers like bronze. She drapes a net over him. For the flies, she says, then the knife flashes. Wet gasp, hiss of steel, crimson across marble. Thunder rumbles softly, like applause. Historians debate if this moralizes arrogance or reflects a real king's murder. Cassandra laughs and weeps, she had warned him, of course, morning comes. Mycenae's lion gate glows red as if remembering. The war begun for love ends in vengeance, the circular logic of Greek tragedy. Gulls cry overhead. You step away from the bloodstained threshold. Behind, Agamemnon's palace falls silent. Ahead, other ships sail home, Menelaus, Nestor, Odysseus, unaware the curse has already begun. You walk through Mycenae's marble halls, but the air is different, metallic, sour, blood drying on stone. Courtiers whisper, no one says the king's name. The house of Atreus has devoured another of its own, Clytemnestra sits calm, almost regal. Her gown spotless. Aegisthus stands beside her, smug, as if waiting for this moment all his life. Outside, the people murmur, a queen who prayed for her husband's safe return, a king who killed his daughter. Justice? Or just another turn of the cursed family wheel? This family doesn't do peace, they do revenge. You think of Atreus, who once killed his brother's children for dinner. The gods watched, the Furies smiled, the curse rooted deep. Pulsing through the halls. Orestes, the young prince, was spirited away, Electra hides grief in silence, watching, waiting, years pass. Mycenae feigns stability, festivals, sacrifices, laughter that doesn't reach eyes. Clytemnestra ages without weakening. Aegisthus grows paranoid, haunted by omens. The Furies arrive softly, whispering, blood for blood. One morning, Orestes returns, grown, lean, hardened. Guided by Apollo's command, he finds Electra by Agamemnon's tomb. Together, they plot vengeance with calm precision. In the old tragedies, the chorus warns, don't spill more blood. The Atreides ignore advice, they take turns. Orestes enters the palace disguised, claiming news of his own death. Clytemnestra's face flickers between disbelief and relief. Moments later, the sword flashes. She cries, my child. The snake I dreamed of. Silence follows. Justice has multiplied the blood, the Furies appear now, dark, winged, ancient. Orestes flees across plains and rivers, their pursuit in his mind. Historians debate if Orestes symbolizes the shift from blood vengeance to law. Later Athena intervenes with the Areopagus, for now, Mycenae is quiet. Electra fades, Aegisthus's corpse forgotten, servants whisper of curses. The war at Troy was never just about love or pride, it sparked generations' flames. Rain patters softly. Far away, Odysseus is still lost at sea, Menelaus still searches. The house of Atreus finally runs out of voices. You exhale, the air tastes of iron. The gods seem satisfied. For now. You stand on a restless coastline. Menelaus's ships drift between remorse and relief. The war for his wife is over, but victory feels uncertain. The sea seems to laugh at it. Menelaus stares at the horizon, Helen beside him, silent and unreadable. Perhaps she thinks of Troy, or how history will brand her, the face that launched 1,000 ships. The crew gives her a wide berth, superstition whispering around her like a storm in disguise. A sudden squall tears across the sea. Ships scatter, lightning splits the sky. Helen stands still, eyes distant. When it passes, only a few ships remain. You approach a pale, endless shore, Egypt. Here's the twist: Herodotus claims the real Helen never went to Troy. Whisked away by the gods before the war. The Greeks fought a phantom, a divine imitation. Menelaus finds her in Egypt, safe and unaged. She smiles faintly, you fought for the wrong me. The universe seems to snicker. In Homer's version, she did go to Troy and returns with Menelaus to Sparta. The marble halls, olive trees, and fountains await, but the city feels haunted. People greet them, but cheers are muted. Helen smiles, speaks softly, shadows clinging to her like perfume. Menelaus tries to rebuild life, banquets, sacrifices, festivals. Every toast feels forced, every smile rehearsed. One night, a bard sings of Troy. Helen rises, placing drops of enchanted wine in each cup. To forgetfulness. She murmurs. The pain of memory ebbs. For a moment, Sparta feels peaceful. A quirky tidbit: Helen appears in marriage rituals as both charm and caution. Archaeology finds her figurines in domestic shrines, a symbol transformed from chaos to grace. Still, not everyone forgives her. Menelaus almost killed her once, rage trembling in his arms, until her beauty melted his anger. Myth rarely worries about consistency. Historians debate Helen's role: guilt or innocence, victim or temptress, woman or divine scapegoat. Perhaps all, which is why her story lingers. Years pass, Sparta quiets. The couple ages, names turning to legend. In some versions, Zeus grants them Elysium, walking together in sunlit meadows as men's wars fade to distant thunder. You watch them fade into the golden horizon, reconciled, or at least exhausted enough to stop fighting fate. The waves whisper a lullaby for two ghosts, never quite real, never quite not. Far north, Mycenae bleeds still. In Ithaca, Odysseus is lost. But here, peace almost feels possible. You are with Nestor, king of Pylos, the oldest and wisest Greek commander, one of the few who survives the war without divine punishment, shipwreck, or family bloodshed. Pylos greets you at dawn, waves gentle, air sweet with honey and salt. Fishermen mend nets, cattle low in the distance. After 10 years of war, the place feels impossibly peaceful. Nestor steps ashore, stooped but smiling, scoops sand and kisses it, and walks into the city where sons and grandchildren run to meet him. No one dies, no one schemes, it's almost suspiciously wholesome. In his Megaron, he talks endlessly. At first, you groan at his "in my day" stories, but soon you see his survival isn't luck, it's restraint. He insulted no gods, took no Trojan gold, brought home no cursed spoils. While Agamemnon drowned in family blood, Odysseus wandered, and Menelaus wrestled ghosts. Nestor simply went home. Peace rarely earns a place in legend. He rebuilds his city, prays, advises younger kings. When Telemachus visits years later, Nestor greets him with food, horses, and care, as though he knows the burden of being a hero's child. Around the hearth, he tells war stories with weary reverence, We thought we were fighting for honor, but most of us were just trying to survive. Outside, children play by the shore. Pylus seems to heal. Yet Nestor still honors Poseidon daily, aware that peace is borrowed, not permanent. He never mentions Helen. When asked, he says, the gods wove her thread differently than ours. Some stories are beyond mortal comprehension. You think of the others: Menelaus, restless; Agamemnon, dead; Ajax, undone by pride; Odysseus, still lost. And here is Nestor, alive, content, almost boring, but perhaps boring is the greatest victory. Pindar wrote, "He who dies in fame may live forever, but he who lives in peace has already defeated time." Nestor embodies this. At night, on the palace roof, he points to constellations, telling their stories of mortal striving, gods intervening, and accidental immortality. Even heroes fade. But the stories, they keep the embers warm, he says. Before you leave, he presses a small wooden horse into your hand. A gift from Troy, he says. Once a symbol of cunning. Now a reminder not to be too clever for our own good. Dawn creeps across the horizon. The waves glimmer gold. Other ships are still lost, but here, in Pylus, the world feels briefly balanced. Peace isn't glamorous, but it is rare, and in the age of heroes, rarity was the nearest thing to divinity. The morning fog clings to your skin as you step into the camp of another man who never made it home. His name once inspired fear on every battlefield: Ajax the Great. Towering, invincible, second only to Achilles in strength. You remember him from the war: massive shield, booming voice, the kind of guy who probably used a spear as a toothpick. But now, what you're walking into isn't a warrior's triumph. It's a tragedy that smells faintly of bronze and madness. The war's over, Troy is ashes, and the Greeks have begun dividing up the spoils. They argue over armor, gold, prisoners, because of course they do. And when it comes to Achilles' armor, the prize of all prizes, things get ugly. Odysseus, with his silver tongue, and Ajax, with his unmatched might, both claim it. You can almost hear the gods rolling dice for entertainment. Historians still argue whether the Greeks voted fairly, or whether Athena tipped the scales for her favorite. Either way, Odysseus wins the armor. Ajax loses his mind. You find him that night, pacing the camp like a storm barely held in a human shape. His breath hitches in low growls, his eyes shimmer with something broken. He's clutching a sword, and you can practically feel the air hum with impending disaster. Suddenly, he lunges into the dark, slashing, stabbing, roaring names. Blood splatters the sand. You think he's massacring his enemies. But when dawn breaks, the truth is horrifyingly mundane: he slaughtered a herd of sheep. He thought they were the men who betrayed him. He stands amid the carcasses, trembling. His mind clears just enough for shame to rush in. The great Ajax, undone not by war, but by humiliation, you watch him fall to his knees. The sun's first rays creep over the horizon, glinting off the blade he presses into the earth. His voice cracks: "No man shall mock me again." The sword plunges deep, the world holds its breath. It's a strange silence, the kind that follows when someone too strong to fail finally does. The sea sighs against the shore as though trying to erase the noise. Later, when his comrades find him, they argue about what to do with the body. Odysseus wants to give him proper rites, Agamemnon refuses. Even in death, Ajax divides them. Finally, Odysseus persuades them to bury him, an act of mercy between rivals that's rare in Greek myth. You stand over the grave mound as they pile stones over the body. His shield lies on top, cracked but still formidable, like the memory of a man too proud for this world. Some scholars think the story of Ajax is a parable about post-war trauma, the ancient Greeks' way of describing what we'd now call survivor's guilt. 10 years of battle, and suddenly peace arrives with no place for men who only know how to fight. Ajax can't adapt. The gods didn't have to punish him, he punished himself. Nearby, you overhear a priest murmuring about Athena's cruelty. She broke him, he says, because he wouldn't bow to her. Maybe it's true, or maybe the madness was already there, waiting for a reason. The Greeks like to say hubris invites divine correction, but sometimes a cracked mind doesn't need divine permission to shatter. You walk through the camp at dusk. Men avoid talking about him. They bury the story under laughter and drink, but you can feel it lingering, the fear that the gods might pick them next. One curious thing, though, in later generations, sailors heading west past Cape Reuteon would stop and pour libations to Ajax. They believed his spirit guarded ships from storms. A man who died in shame becomes, in time, a protector. Legends have a way of forgiving what life couldn't. There's a strange tenderness in that. People need their fallen heroes to mean something. Otherwise, they're just reminders of how fragile strength really is. You remember a line from Sophocles' later play Ajax: "The same hand that saved 1,000 lives can't save its owner." It's haunting because it's true. For all the glory of Troy, most heroes didn't know what to do when there were no more enemies left to kill. You kneel by the grave and brush aside a bit of sand. A single olive sprout pushes through the dirt, green and defiant. Maybe that's the real afterlife, not a ghost, not Olympus, but a tiny new life growing where despair once stood. As you walk away, the night wind picks up. Somewhere, a gull cries. The sea stretches endless and indifferent. But you swear, just for a moment, you hear laughter, deep, proud, unbroken. Ajax, still defying the world. The waves turn red in the sunset as your next companion comes into view, young, fierce, and just a little too sure of himself. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles. You can see the resemblance, the same fire in the eyes, the same effortless stride that says the world exists to be conquered. But where Achilles was tragic and poetic, Neoptolemus is sharp-edged, almost cruel. He's a child of victory, not of glory. You first saw him in Troy's final days, when the Greeks brought out that infamous horse. He was barely a man then, maybe 16, his father already long dead. The songs call him Pyrrhus, the red-haired one, and if the poets are right, his temper matched the color, after the city fell. While others squabbled over treasure, Neoptolemus carved a path through the wreckage like a walking omen. He killed Priam himself, old, helpless, clinging to an altar. The act shocked even hardened warriors. Some claimed he spat on the gods, others said the gods guided his hand. Historians still argue whether that detail was meant to glorify or damn him. Either way, it stuck. You follow him now through the smoldering streets. His sword drips, his eyes bright. Around him, the once golden city is a charnel house. And yet he's calm, eerily calm. Like someone fulfilling a prophecy he doesn't even believe in, he takes Andromache, Hector's widow, as his prize. You remember her grief. Quiet but unending. She becomes his concubine, bearing him a son. It's hard to watch, two lives ruined by a war neither of them started, now bound together by its echo. Still, there's something more human in Neoptolemus than the stories suggest. When you travel with him back across the sea, you notice he isn't boastful like other victors. He doesn't shout at the waves or curse the winds. He just stares into the horizon, lost. Maybe he senses that Troy isn't done haunting him. When his ship lands in Epirus, a wild, mountainous region in northwestern Greece, he decides to stay. No marble palaces, no bustling ports, just rugged hills and fog-drenched forests. Here, he builds a new kingdom. You'd think he's trying to start fresh, but something darker creeps beneath the surface. One night, in a dream, Achilles appears to him. The shade of the great warrior demands sacrifice, blood to honor his tomb. Neoptolemus obeys. He slaughters captives beside his father's grave, thinking it'll earn divine favor. But it doesn't. If anything, it marks him. In Delphi, years later, he returns to question Apollo's oracle, maybe to seek forgiveness, maybe to accuse the god of ruining his family. He never makes it back. The priests strike him down inside the temple. Some say he attacked them first, others whisper that Apollo himself guided the blow. Either way, the son of Achilles dies where mortals aren't meant to raise their voices. You stand among the columns of Delphi, sunlight flickering through pines. His blood stains the marble, but even in death, he looks defiant. The air smells faintly of smoke and myrrh. Somewhere, a priest chants his name as if trying to soothe a restless ghost. The irony isn't lost on you, a boy born from vengeance, killed by it. The Greeks built shrines to him later, calling him a hero god. In some regions, sailors sacrificed black rams to him before long voyages, hoping his restless spirit would calm the waves. It's a curious kind of immortality, half divine, half cautionary tale. You trace his lineage forward and realize his bloodline doesn't vanish with him. His son by Andromache grows up in Epirus, ruling a small but loyal kingdom. Centuries later, Romans will claim descent from the Trojans, not the Greeks, but the irony remains, both lineages spring from the ashes of Troy, bound by love and slaughter. Sometimes, late at night, you imagine what Achilles would think if he could see his son now. Maybe pride, maybe sorrow. The Greeks worshipped the idea of fate, but they also feared inheritance, the way violence passes from father to son like a cursed heirloom. You camp by the ruins of Neoptolemus' palace. The stones are cold, the wind howls through cracked pillars. Andromache's ghost, they say, still walks here, whispering lullabies to a son who never learned peace. You almost hear her, soft and broken, in the rustling leaves. There's a story from later poets that says Neoptolemus' bones were divided, half buried in Delphi, half in Epirus, so neither land would claim him entirely. It fits. He belonged to no one, not even to himself. Before you leave, you pass a weathered relief carved into the cliffside, a young man standing beside a horse, hand outstretched toward the sea. The face is half eroded, but the stance, proud, unyielding, remains unmistakable. You brush off the moss and whisper his name, Neoptolemus. The boy who inherited a war, carried its ghosts, and became one. The wind shifts again, carrying you east, back toward the ruins of Troy, what's left of it. The city lies in layered silence now, stones cooling under a waning sun. But some voices never stopped speaking. Among the survivors dragged away in chains were two of Priam's children, twins in tragedy if not in name, Helenus and Cassandra. You find them standing apart from the other captives, twin shadows on the horizon. Both share the curse of prophecy, and both know exactly what's coming. Which, as you can imagine, makes for the world's most depressing dinner conversation. Helenus, the brother, looks more monk than prince, calm, resigned, eyes like the deep water that always knows what lies beneath. Cassandra, on the other hand, trembles with a kind of furious clarity. Her hair is matted with ash, her wrists are bound, her gaze burns straight through you. She's the one who warned everyone this would happen, remember? The one no one listened to. It said Apollo gave her the gift of prophecy because she caught his eye. When she refused him, he spat in her mouth, curse attached. She would see the truth, but no one would ever believe her. That's Greek mythology for you, divine retribution dressed up as irony. As you walk beside the prisoners, the air feels charged, as though the gods themselves are still eavesdropping. Cassandra whispers, "We will not see home again. Not in life." Helenus simply nods. He doesn't argue, he's already seen it too. Historians still argue whether Helenus' story was meant as redemption or survival instinct. After Troy's fall, he's taken captive by Neoptolemus, yes, Achilles' son, the same one you just left behind. But instead of resisting, Helenus adapts. He becomes Neoptolemus' counselor, his seer, his quiet voice of reason. And when Neoptolemus dies, Helenus inherits his kingdom, marrying Andromache, Hector's widow, who's been traded like a relic between victors. It's a tragic tangle of destinies, all of them stitched together by loss. Cassandra, though, doesn't get a kingdom. She gets Agamemnon. You board the same ship that carries them back to Mycenae, the sails swollen, the sea a dark mirror. She stands at the prow, hair whipping in the wind, eyes distant. She knows she's sailing not toward freedom but her final act. The sailors whisper about omens, how the waves hiss her name, how the dolphins follow her wake. In Mycenae, the tragedy unfolds exactly as she foresaw. Agamemnon returns triumphant, drags her into his palace, and is promptly murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra. Cassandra dies beside him, struck down before she can even scream. It's an ending that feels inevitable, not because the gods willed it, but because no one ever learns. You stand in that blood-slicked hall and realize her curse wasn't disbelief, it was futility. Even when she was right, people preferred comfort to truth, but Helena's story continues. In Epirus, he and Andromache rebuild something fragile but real. They raise her son, Molossus, who will one day found a dynasty. You might think this sounds like peace, but every night, Helenus dreams of fire. He wakes to the sound of phantom screams, his sister's voice echoing through the stone corridors. He consults the oracles, sacrifices to the gods, but prophecy is never merciful. You sit with him one evening on the steps of his temple. The stars are thin, the night air cool. He tells you about the day Apollo first gave him sight, how knowledge felt like drowning in a flood of futures. Seeing is not knowing, he says quietly. It's remembering what hasn't happened yet. You're not sure what that means, but you feel its weight. There's a strange rumor about Helenus, that when Aeneas, the Trojan hero destined to found Rome, passed through Epirus, Helenus welcomed him, prophesied his fate, and gave him Andromache's blessing. Two survivors of Troy meeting in exile, both carrying ghosts, both pretending the gods still care. It's a beautiful lie, and maybe that's enough. In that meeting, Helenus supposedly told Aeneas, "You will build new walls for our old tears." You imagine Cassandra would have laughed bitterly at that. But Helenus says it with something like hope. After all, maybe the only way to heal a fallen city is to build a new one somewhere else. Before you leave, you visit the small shrine Helenus built for his sister. It's nothing grand, just a ring of white stones and a sprig of laurel. Someone, probably Andromache, leaves offerings, olive oil, honey, woven cloth. The breeze stirs, and you could swear you hear Cassandra's voice again, soft and almost forgiving. You wonder, standing there, whether the curse truly ended with her death. Maybe it never was a curse, maybe it was just a metaphor for what it feels like to know the truth in a world that prefers lies. As you turn to go, the sea glimmers faintly in the distance, silver as prophecy itself. Somewhere far off, a new Troy is waiting to be born. You walk away, the whispers fading into the wind. The air smells of salt and wild thyme as you find yourself once again on the deck of a ship. The oars dip in unison, the sea sighs, and somewhere behind you Troy is only a smudge on the horizon. You're following a man who has become almost more idea than human, Odysseus of Ithaca, the master of cunning, the man of many turns. His war is over, but his story is just beginning, and it's going to take a decade to finish. The gods, as usual, can't resist meddling. Poseidon, salty in every sense of the word, still hasn't forgiven Odysseus for blinding his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. And Athena, ever the strategist, loves him but can't quite protect him from himself. Historians still argue whether Odysseus' voyage represents punishment, fate, or just an ancient excuse for island-hopping misadventure, but you don't have time to pick sides. The waves are rising again. The first stop is Ismarus, land of the Cyclones. Odysseus and his men raid it easily enough, but, because subtlety isn't their strong suit, they linger too long celebrating. Reinforcements arrive, and the Greeks barely escape with their lives. You watch Odysseus shouting over the surf, face streaked with spray and regret, already realizing that victory and wisdom rarely share a bed. Next comes the land of the lotus eaters, where the air smells of honey and apathy. His men taste the flower and instantly forget home. classic ancient narcotic problem. You watch Odysseus drag them back to the ships. Kicking and screaming, because apparently leadership means saving people from their own good time. Then, the Cyclops. You see the cave first, a dark maw lined with bones and fleeces. Inside, Polyphemus, massive and lazy, chews human bones like olives. Odysseus, thinking himself clever, introduces himself as nobody, gets the Cyclops drunk, and drives a sharpened stake into that single eye. It works beautifully until, leaving, he decides to shout his real name across the water. "Tell them Odysseus blinded you." He yells, and you can almost hear Poseidon sigh, "Oh, for Trident's sake." The next few years are a blur of wind, loss, and bad decisions. Aeolus gives Odysseus a bag of winds, an actual leather bag containing the breeze itself, and his men, thinking it's treasure, open it mid-voyage. The ship spins, the wind screams, and you all get tossed halfway back to where you started. Somewhere, Aeolus crosses Odysseus off his Christmas list. You drift with him through the land of the Laestrygonians, giant cannibals who treat sailors like snacks. Ships splinter, men vanish, and only one vessel escapes. You can't tell whether this is a journey or an elaborate lesson in not trusting strangers. Then comes Circe, the sorceress of Aeaea. You walk through her island of fragrant woods and hear pigs squealing in the distance. Except, of course, they aren't pigs, they're Odysseus' men. Circe welcomes him, offers wine, and for once, brains outsmart brawn. He holds a sprig of moly, an herb Hermes gave him for protection, and forces her to restore his men. What follows is an extended stay. A year, to be exact. You lose track of time in the warmth, the laughter, the godly ease. Circe isn't exactly the villain of the piece, she's more like a divine rest stop in the marathon of misery. When Odysseus finally sails away, it's at her urging. She tells him to visit the land of the dead to seek prophecy from the shade of Tiresias. That's never a comforting travel recommendation. You follow him into the underworld, the air cold and metallic. Shades rise from the black river, whispering secrets. He sees his mother, long dead, Achilles, who confesses he'd rather be a living slave than a glorious corpse, and poor Agamemnon, who warns him never to trust a woman completely, a somewhat biased opinion, considering the circumstances of his death. Returning to the world of light, Odysseus faces the sirens. Their song isn't seductive so much as nostalgic, every note promising rest, home, forgiveness. You feel it too, a pull in the chest. He ties himself to the mast while his men plug their ears with beeswax. The sea glitters, the voices fade, and he survives by denying every beautiful thing that calls his name. Then, the twin terrors, Scylla and Charybdis. One a many-headed monster perched on a cliff, the other a whirlpool swallowing the sea itself. You choose the monster, better 6 dead than everyone. It's the kind of choice leaders make and poets later romanticize. By the time you reach the island of Helios, the men are starving. They swear not to touch the sacred cattle, but hunger trumps piety. They feast while Odysseus sleeps, and when they sail away, Zeus sends a storm that rips the ship apart. Odysseus alone clings to wreckage and drifts for 9 days, at last, the island of Calypso. A nymph with all the patience of eternity and none of the boundaries of consent. She offers him immortality if he'll stay, but the irony is thick. Odysseus' greatest curse is his humanity, and his greatest blessing too. He weeps by the shore every evening until the gods intervene. Hermes delivers the divine breakup notice. Calypso sighs, helps him build a raft, and sends him back to a world that will never feel quite real again. You watch him sail away, a solitary figure framed by sun and salt. 10 years of wandering, and he's aged in ways time alone can't measure. He's learned that cleverness doesn't conquer loneliness. And that home is both destination and illusion. As the wind fills his sail, you wonder whether he even believes Ithaca still exists, or if it's just a dream he keeps rowing toward because turning back would mean he's nothing without the journey. the sea glows faintly green under the moonlight. Somewhere ahead lies the faint outline of a familiar island. He straightens, grips the tiller, and whispers something you can't quite hear, maybe a prayer, maybe a memory. When Odysseus finally reaches Ithaca, you'd think the story would end there. Man returns home, wife rejoices, son embraces him, curtain falls. But this is Greece, and happy endings require at least one body count and a handful of moral ambiguity. He wakes up on a beach, alone again, salt-caked and ragged. Athena appears, not in blinding divine glory but as a shepherd, because gods here prefer their theatrics subtle. She tells him to stay hidden. 20 years gone, and his palace isn't his anymore. A swarm of suitors feasts in his halls, vying for Penelope's hand, devouring his livestock, and plotting to kill his son. Ithaca hasn't been faithful, it's been occupied. Odysseus disguises himself as a beggar. There's irony here, a man once hailed as a hero reduced to rags in his own home. But it's the kind of irony Greek tragedy eats for breakfast. You follow him as he limps through familiar streets, the same stones, the same olive trees, but the air feels foreign, thick with other people's laughter. Dogs bark at him. Children throw pebbles. He meets Telemachus first, his son, now grown, all restless energy and untested pride. The reunion is quiet, almost painfully restrained. Odysseus reveals himself, tears in his eyes, but Telemachus has never known this man. Love, in that moment, feels like faith, believing before you understand. Together, they plan revenge. The day of reckoning arrives under the guise of a feast. Penelope has set an impossible challenge. Whoever can string Odysseus' bow and shoot an arrow clean through 12 axe heads will win her hand. The suitors laugh, fail, and curse the stiffness of the bow. Then the beggar steps forward. You can almost hear the universe hold its breath. He strings it effortlessly. The twang echoes through the hall like thunder before a storm. One arrow flies, then another, and the laughter turns to screams. Odysseus sheds his disguise, eyes bright with fury and something darker, righteousness, maybe, or the exhaustion of a man who's run out of ways to forgive. Blood pools on the marble floor. Telemachus fights beside him, a son becoming his father's shadow. The last suitor falls with a look of disbelief that anyone could love a woman this much, or hate betrayal more deeply. When the hall is silent, Odysseus stands among the bodies, chest heaving, bow still in hand. The revenge is perfect, but it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like a man crossing a finish line only to realize the race was never worth running. Penelope enters. She stares at him, not speaking. You'd think she'd rush forward. But she's spent 2 decades mastering patience, and patience doesn't fade overnight. She tests him, asking questions, watching the way his eyes move. Finally, she mentions the bed, how it's built into a living olive tree, immovable, something only he could know. That's when he breaks. The warrior, the trickster, the wanderer, all dissolve into a husband who has finally come home. They embrace, and for one breathless instant, the world feels just, but the gods, as ever, can't leave mortals alone for long. Families of the slain suitors rise in fury, demanding retribution. The land quivers on the edge of civil war. Athena appears again, a streak of gold and shadow, commanding peace. The fighting stops, not because of divine authority, but because everyone is simply too tired to keep the story going. You look at Odysseus now, older, smaller somehow, his eyes dimmer. The Odyssey doesn't end in celebration but in uneasy quiet. He's home, yes, but home is never what you remember. Penelope's hair is silvered, Telemachus doesn't need him. Even the olive trees whisper differently. The war hero has nowhere left to conquer. Some later myths say he grows restless again, that he sails one last time, seeking something beyond mortal life. Dante imagined him steering into the western sea, chasing the horizon until the world swallowed him whole. You like to think that maybe, for once, he found a place that didn't test him, no gods, no monsters, just the sound of waves and the faint smell of home carried on the wind, and as you drift away from the story, lulled by the rhythm of oars and the echo of his journey, you realize why this tale still matters. It's not about gods or glory, it's about the impossibility of returning unchanged. Odysseus' true adventure wasn't the sea, it was the slow, painful rediscovery of what it means to be human after being legend. Somewhere, a rooster crows. The night fades. The story ends the only way all stories do, with someone finally closing their eyes, whispering that they've made it home, even if only in dreams. The calm of Ithaca lasts only so long. You soon realize that the aftermath of war isn't tidy. Across the Aegean, news of Troy's fall ripples like wildfire through the Greek cities. Some celebrate, others mourn, and a few simply plot their next chance at glory. You step into a land still reeling, where heroes and survivors are scattered like seeds in the wind, each carrying the bitter fruit of the decade-long conflict. One such figure is Menelaus, back in Sparta. After the return with Helen, whether real or phantom, you can see him wrestling with a strange mixture of relief and guilt. The city greets him with cautious jubilation. There are sacrifices to Athena, feasts, and the sound of horns. But nothing feels complete. War leaves a residue, a faint taste of ash that even victory cannot erase. Menelaus' life becomes a pattern of uneasy peace. He rebuilds his household, yet every face in Sparta seems to carry the ghosts of absent friends. You follow him as he visits the graves of fallen soldiers, the silence of the tombs louder than any festival. The man who once chased vengeance across the Aegean now finds himself chasing understanding, trying to make sense of the chaos he helped create. A quirky detail emerges. The Spartans developed a ritual called the shield offering, where families would lay shields or weapons on the graves of warriors. Some historians argue this was purely symbolic. A way to honor the dead, others suggest it was a psychological salve, an attempt to exorcise the lingering violence from their homes. You watch Menelaus place a bronze shield carefully, whispering the name of a comrade, almost as if speaking aloud will remind the universe not to forget. Meanwhile, back in Mycenae, the remaining Greek leaders struggle with their own demons. Agamemnon's palace remains empty and tense, a monument to mismanagement and fate. The memory of his murder at the hands of Clytemnestra hangs over the halls like a storm cloud. His surviving family tiptoes around alliances, suspicious of both men and gods, realizing that no return from Troy promises safety. Historians still debate whether these domestic disasters were a continuation of divine punishment or merely human weakness magnified by storytelling. Even Odysseus, once reunited with Penelope, faces new challenges. The suitors' families and loyalists simmer in resentment, creating an undercurrent of tension that never fully disappears. He must negotiate, strategize, and remind everyone that he is still king, not through force, necessarily, but by presence and wisdom. You see him pacing in the palace garden at dusk, staring at the horizon as if measuring time itself. The older heroes, Nestor and Menelaus, begin passing down their experiences. They become living archives, recounting tales of bravery, cunning, and misfortune to the next generation. But their stories are tinged with melancholy. Every adventure, every victory, carries the faintest shadow of loss. They whisper lessons that no one fully hears, because the allure of heroism often outshines the quiet truths of survival. In this period, even the gods seem less involved. Poseidon's wrath lingers for Odysseus, but the divine interventions that once shaped destinies now manifest subtly: storm clouds, murmurs, portents in birds. Mortals learn that the gods' influence isn't always about spectacle, sometimes it's about constant, quiet pressure, the kind that shapes decisions without anyone noticing. Interestingly, there's a tradition that Helen, tired of mortal politics, retires to a quiet sanctuary near the Nile in Egypt. Archaeologists note small figurines and votive offerings that suggest her presence was venerated far from Sparta, transforming from a cause of war into a protective figure. You imagine her watching over sailors and wanderers, smiling faintly at their misfortunes and victories alike. the broader Greek world also changes. Cities begin rebuilding, trade resumes, and alliances form in new configurations. The Trojan War is no longer a current event but a story, slowly morphing into myth, teaching lessons about pride, perseverance, and the fickleness of fortune. You realize that the end of the war doesn't erase its consequences. It merely scatters them across time and geography, in ways both subtle and profound. The heroes may have returned, but the world they left is not the same. Peace is fragile, memories linger, and new stories are already taking shape, waiting for the next generation to stumble into them. You watch as a young boy plays along the shore, pretending to be Odysseus or Achilles. The cycle continues, a reminder that even after the greatest wars, life goes on, shaped forever by echoes of the past. Across the scattered Greek cities, the echoes of Troy's fall ripple into the lives of ordinary people. Not everyone was a hero, a king, or a prophet. Most were farmers, merchants, or craftsmen, whose worlds were turned upside down by a war they barely understood. You walk among them, feeling the dust of fields trampled by marching armies and listening to tales of loss and resilience that never made it into epic poetry. In Ithaca, shepherds rebuild the flocks decimated by Odysseus' absence and the suitor's gluttony. They speak quietly about the man who returned, whispering his cunning and rage, yet leaving out the blood on the palace floor. Stories morph in whispers. One family insists Odysseus vanished for 20 years simply to learn magic. Another that he fought monsters the size of houses before ever reaching home. Historians still argue whether these embellishments reflect cultural memory or just human love of drama. Meanwhile, in Athens, bards travel from town to town singing the Trojan tales. You sit by the fire, hearing songs of Helen's beauty, Hector's bravery, and Achilles' rage, but also noticing the gaps. Who speaks for the women left behind, the slaves, the soldiers who died quietly on the beaches of Troy? A fringe tradition claims that ordinary soldiers began carving their own inscriptions on tombstones, leaving small but persistent traces of the human cost that kings and poets ignored. Back in Pylos, Nestor's advice continues to shape local politics. Young warriors, curious and restless, visit him seeking guidance. He speaks slowly, emphasizing prudence over pride, patience over glory. His counsel is sometimes ignored, but it is recorded in stone and scroll, a quiet ripple through generations that the poets never dramatize. You notice a subtle theme: the greatest stories may not be about who kills or conquers, but who survives to tell the tale. Meanwhile, Troy's ruins attract scavengers and settlers alike. Some dig for gold, some for pottery, some for memories. Local legends speak of ghosts wandering the broken streets at night, of Hector and Paris walking unseen, forever bound to their fallen city. Travelers claim they hear Cassandra's warnings echoing across the hills, a reminder that wisdom ignored is still wisdom, even in death. Odysseus, though home, is no longer simply a man. Stories of his cunning spread across the islands, his name synonymous with survival, cleverness, and human stubbornness. But he is haunted by the choices he made. Every decision, every trick, every deception lingers like shadows in corners of his house. You watch him sit quietly in the evening, staring at the flickering firelight, silently acknowledging that heroism comes with costs that no song can fully capture. Helen and Menelaus, together again, work to stabilize Sparta, but the tension of lingering rivals is never fully gone. Small skirmishes, disputes over land, and occasional pirate attacks remind them that peace, like war, is a constant negotiation. And so, life continues, as unglamorous and intricate as weaving a tapestry from frayed threads. You notice that children born after the war are growing up with a strange inheritance, the legacy of a conflict they never saw. They play among the ruins of cities, unaware of the blood that once soaked the stones, yet unconsciously carrying its lessons. You realize that history, in its quietest form, lives in memory, habit, and the subtle shaping of culture. Long after the heroes have died, in a small grove outside the city, you watch an old woman, once a servant in Agamemnon's palace, scatter grain for birds. She hums a melody that no bard ever wrote down, a song of resilience, patience, and quiet survival. For the first time, you understand that the story of the Trojan aftermath isn't only about kings or warriors. It is about every human who endured, adapted, and continued. Even amidst ruins and sorrow, life persists. The wind carries stories across the sea, songs of heroes and the ordinary alike, and you recognize a profound truth: history isn't just in the battles remembered, but in the lives rebuilt. You find yourself walking through the scattered islands of the Aegean, following the last threads of the Trojan saga as they unravel into myth, memory, and the mundane. Not every return is dramatic, some are quietly tragic, some curiously comic, and most are a mix of both, like a stew left too long over a gentle fire. You watch as survivors settle, rebuild, and confront the consequences of decisions made in the heat of war. Take Diomedes, for example. After Troy, he returns to Argos only to discover his wife has been unfaithful, or at least, that's how the gossip spreads. Furious, he abandons the city and sails toward Italy, founding cities along the way. His adventures in exile are less about heroism than stubborn survival. You notice he carries a strange aura, a man always in motion, restless, unable to settle in one place after seeing the world burn. Historians still argue whether Diomedes represents the wandering Greek spirit or simply a cautionary tale about returning home too late. Meanwhile, in Thrace, Protesilaus' widow mourns her husband quietly, without the fanfare of epic poetry. You see her laying flowers on a hill overlooking the sea, whispering to the wind. A fringe tale claims she once conversed with his ghost, negotiating closure that the living never could. Her grief is unnoticed by kings and bards alike, yet it is no less profound. Back in Ithaca, Telemachus begins to rule, guided by Odysseus' lessons but also testing his own judgment. You see him navigating political intrigue, asserting authority over restless vassals, and learning the delicate balance between power and mercy. Unlike the open battles of Troy, these skirmishes are fought with words, alliances, and strategy, arguably far more dangerous than swords. The women of Troy, meanwhile, are dispersed across the Mediterranean. Some become concubines, others marry local rulers, and a few vanish into obscurity. Andromache, for instance, settles in Epirus with Helenus, raising Molossus and attempting to craft a life from the remnants of tragedy. You watch her tending a small olive grove, the sun glinting on leaves, the past never far but the present painfully real. Across the Aegean, settlers and ex-soldiers begin forming new cities, tracing roads, and establishing trade. Ruins are repurposed, stone by stone, as if the land itself insists on continuity. You note an intriguing pattern: relics of Troy, vases, weapons, inscriptions, spread across Greek cities, serving as both warnings and teaching tools. Scholars argue whether this was deliberate memorialization or mere opportunism. Either way, the cultural memory of the war embeds itself in daily life. Even the gods appear in quieter, subtler ways. Athena watches over Ithaca, Poseidon still lingers near Odysseus' path, but interventions are minimal: no storms, no divine armies, just nudges, whispers, and visions. The age of overt divine drama is giving way to an era where mortals learn the hard way that consequences rarely come with a warning. You wander through one such settlement, watching children mimic heroic deeds with sticks for swords, pretending to fight monsters, imagining themselves in epics they will only ever hear secondhand. The adults, meanwhile, rebuild homes, mend nets, and cultivate olive trees. It's an unglamorous, stubborn continuity, the essence of life after chaos. A scholar might say this era after Troy is where history begins to separate itself from legend. The stories of gods and heroes remain, but beneath them, the ordinary humans adapt, survive, and quietly shape the world. You realize that the real aftermath of Troy isn't in epic battles or heroic deaths, it's in survival, memory, and the enduring human spirit that persists long after the bards have moved on. As the sun sets over the islands, you feel the weight of countless untold stories: the humble, the grieving, the persistent. Even in silence, life goes on, reshaped but unbroken, echoing the legacy of Troy in ways both grand and imperceptibly small. By now, the tale of Troy's aftermath has become a tapestry of journeys, grief, cunning, and endurance. You walk along the coasts of the Aegean one last time, feeling the soft spray of waves on your face, listening to gulls squabble over scraps, and noticing how ordinary life creeps back into every crack left by war. This is the world of the survivors, the quiet, complex, and surprisingly persistent. Nestor, the wise king of Pylos, continues his gentle reign. You watch him dispense advice to villagers, young warriors, and even wandering bards, reminding everyone that experience is a teacher that never stops lecturing. He's older now, slower, his armor polished only for ceremonial purposes. His voice a calm river cutting through the chaos of human ambition. In his presence, you sense that some lessons of the Trojan War, hubris, patience, loyalty, may finally be understood, at least in fragments. Menelaus, settled back in Sparta with Helen, moves through his days with the careful grace of a man who survived catastrophe. Together, they rebuild a semblance of order. Their home becomes a center of quiet diplomacy, a hub for travelers, and a place where stories are recounted, embroidered, and preserved. You notice the subtle rituals, a feast in the evening to honor fallen warriors, a silent nod to the sacrifices unseen, a gentle discipline for children learning that valor is not just in battle but in daily life. Even those who were once enemies find their roles evolving. Some Greek leaders return to farming, others to minor governance, and a few, like Diomedes, wander into new lands, founding cities, leaving faint traces of Trojan blood and Greek resolve mingling in distant regions. Their names become part of myth, their actions part of living memory, each serving as a reminder that the world after Troy isn't static, it's restless, moving, alive. You think again of the women, the children, and the ordinary men who endured. Their stories, often absent from epic songs, shape the very fabric of civilization. Some traditions claim that every Greek household observed annual rituals commemorating fallen comrades, offering olive branches and small sacrifices, quietly acknowledging the cost of a war that was never theirs to start. Historians still debate whether these customs were spiritual or psychological, but you sense a little of both, a means to process grief, to preserve memory, and to teach future generations that survival requires reflection as much as courage. Meanwhile, Troy itself fades into legend. The stones are repurposed, the streets abandoned, and the names of heroes echo faintly on the wind. You imagine shepherds walking among the ruins centuries later, finding fragments of pottery, bits of bronze, and whispering to the past. The city dies and lives simultaneously, a shadow that shapes the living without ever touching them directly. Odysseus, finally, sits in Ithaca. He teaches Telemachus, reconciles with Penelope, and navigates a fragile peace. His adventures, long and tortuous, have carved lines into his face, and shadows into his soul. But he endures. You sense that perhaps this is the real legacy of Troy, not the walls that fell, the kings who died, or the battles that were sung, but the resilience of those who walked onward, step by step, into the uncertain light of tomorrow. As night drapes over the islands, the sea whispers its ancient lullaby. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, a child laughs, and a tree rustles softly in the evening breeze. Life, for all its scars, continues. Troy may be gone, but its echoes live on, in cities, in stories, and most importantly, in the hearts of those who endure. And as you settle beside the shore, feeling the sand cool under your hands, you realize, the aftermath of war is not just destruction. It is memory, adaptation, and the persistent pulse of human life, quietly, stubbornly, and beautifully moving forward. Now, let the tension of the tales fade. Feel the sand beneath your hands, the salt breeze brushing softly against your cheeks, carrying away the echoes of battle and grief. Every footstep you've traced across ruins, every whispered prophecy and hero's lament, drifts gently into the night, dissolving like mist over calm waters. The sun has long disappeared, leaving the sky a deep, comforting indigo, sprinkled with the faint, steady shimmer of stars, each one a tiny witness to the stories of men and women who lived and endured. Breathe slowly. Hear the whispering waves as they lap against the shore, a lullaby older than the Trojan War itself. Imagine the survivors, the children, the women. And the ordinary folk you walked among. They, too, have closed their eyes, tucked themselves beneath blankets, and let the night soothe them. Their hearts beat quietly with persistence, the rhythm of life after chaos, a rhythm that carries on without expectation or grandeur. You probably won't remember every hero's name, every battle, or every betrayal. And that's okay. What lingers are the subtle lessons. Courage can be quiet, endurance can be humble, and memory, even when flawed, shapes the world in ways that song and story cannot always capture. Imagine the soft sway of olive branches, the faint scent of the sea, the gentle crackle of a fire as it dies down, leaving only warmth and the faint scent of smoke. Let your mind drift along the currents of the Aegean, past shattered walls, over sunlit hills, and into the calm of night. Troy's story has ended, yet life continues, in rhythms, in whispers, in the slow, tender resilience of all who survive. Feel yourself ease, slowly, softly, letting each breath carry you further into rest. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the memory of this journey settle into your dreams, where heroes and ordinary folk alike walk together across the quiet shores of history.